The Taming of Coyote, Chapter 30. This was awkward. This was very awkward. Sonia had lived in Tern her entire life. However, she realized just how little she knew about Lord Grundle. Even after 2 years in his care, she still knew so little. He was a mysterious man, and one she could not figure out. He seemed conniving and secretive. He didn't want to be understood for who he truly was, unlike Coyote. In Lord Grundle's home, she felt the air was always heavy with tension, nearly crushing her, though his home was unnecessarily large. It intimidated her and often forced her into cowering in silence. She had no true friends now. It was just him, and she'd never consider him a friend, even now. On the other hand, what on earth would she have to tell Lord Grundle? They had nothing in common. Perhaps it was not his intention, but she always felt a sense of shame in his presence. It was even hard to eat at the same table with him.
"My dear, don't you think this childishness has gone on long enough?" Lord Grundle chuckled. "This silent treatment must stop."
He brought his fingertips together as he stared across the breakfast table at his future bride.
"There is no need to look so miserable. Haven't I been good to you? You don't seem to realize or appreciate just how good you have it. How lucky you are. I am at the top of Tern's pyramid." He grinned wickedly. "It won't be long now before I'm on top of a Tern."
Oh, how vulgar that comment was. If Sonia had even had an appetite to begin with, it would have been gone.
"You can't do any better than me."
"Yes, sir."
"What troubles you so, Sonia? Will you not speak to me?"
"What shall we speak about, Lord Grundle?"
"Please," he smirked. "Call me Emery."
"Why?" That prompted a real laugh from him.
"Emery is my first name. If you are to be my wife, you are entitled to use it."
"Oh," was her simple reply.
"Our union is a very special one, Sonia," he said. "Do you know why?"
"We are both chosen by God?"
"No, my dear. Your bloodline has a lot of rich history. Finally, I can take it as my own and use it to further God's teachings."
"Even the part about the harmony between the humans and coyotes so many years ago?" she asked. "You hate them so much, but it is impossible to claim Tern's history without admitting that the coyotes are not evil or devils." Lord Grundle narrowed his eyes at her and tightened his face until his lips puckered.
"What does a child like you know of Tern's history?"
"The man in the woods told me all about Tern. I don't see what he would have to gain by lying to me." It annoyed him that he couldn't come up with a witty reply or explanation. This man in the woods sure seemed like a suspicious creature. He was meddling in Lord Grundle's plans and affairs without even being present. He couldn't be so bold as to call Sonia a liar. Even before her little adventure, she knew much more about the woods than he did. Lord Grundle had never been beyond the fence, and it would likely remain that way. Out there, they would come for him. No, such a thing would be too dangerous. Of all people, the coyotes wanted the blood of the holy man. Of that he was for certain. It was safer to remain inside the fence.
"Well," he finally said, "our Lord works in mysterious ways. I'm sure that he will explain everything to me. I will pray for you."
That was the last thing that Lord Grundle had said before leaving Sonia alone. His home was the closest to the square. Therefore, he often made evening visits to the church. Sonia had been asked to join him, as always. Truth be told, the last thing she wanted was to spend time in the church alone with Lord Grundle. The time was so close for her 16th birthday, the day she would become of age. Lord Grundle was like a hungry wolf. She could see the lust and anticipation in his eyes, and she knew his ability to control himself would be fading. No, she would avoid any time alone with him, therefore avoiding any temptation for him to violate her. This time, she had convinced him that she was not feeling well, and that she wished to retire to her chambers to sleep her ails away. Time brought no comfort for Sonia. She hated this place, as well as the prospect of becoming the lady over it. The more she realized her disdain for Lord Grundle, the more she longed for Coyote. She missed him dearly, and she came to understand her feelings for him. She would never love Lord Grundle, for she was in love with Coyote. She was flat on her back on the bed as she stared blankly and hopelessly at the ceiling. There was a slight crack. That would likely need to be repaired soon. Oh, was she doomed to go on like this for the rest of her days? Even after Lord Grundle was gone from this world, she still wouldn't be free. If he had his way, she'd be burdened down with his offspring. Oh, why, Coyote, allow this fate? The notion to cry came up a few times in her mind. Sonia fought back her tears time and time again. Despite her growing hopelessness and despair, what good would those tears bring? Her eyes soon drifted away from the ceiling and to the nightstand. Up she sat and reached for a hand mirror that was resting upon it. Sonia studied the features of her reflection and frowned. Her free hand ran along her cheek. What would become of her like this? What? In a moment of blind frustration, Sonia threw the mirror to the ground. It crashed, and the glass broke into countless fragments of variable sizes. She picked up the handle and tossed it aside. Then she snatched up the largest of the glass shards. A life of this fate was not a life worth living. She could not face another day of it. She trembled and grit her teeth as she braced herself for it. Death was coming, and she was ready and waiting. A bark suddenly pulled Sonia from her moment. A bark? No one around here had a dog that she could hear. Only the far-off farms of Tern had dogs, and only very few dared to keep any for fear of passing coyotes. Could it be? Could it possibly be? After these so few but everlasting years? Ezra! Quickly she opened the window and peered down to the ground below. There he was. There stood Ezra. He was larger now, as he was no longer a juvenile, but an adult. He still paled in size to some of the other coyotes. Perhaps he was a runt after all, but he had certainly grown. His tongue flopped out as he peered his panting head up at her and wagged his tail with great glee. He had found her. Ezra, no! What are you doing here? It was so funny to him how, even now, she would ask such a question. Anywhere but here, Ezra! Sonia paled as he crouched down and began to skip and bounce like a bunny. No, it's too high! You'll never make it! Go home to Coyote, Ezra! Go! This would not do. Granted, Ezra was in an alleyway, but he wasn't invisible. One thing he was, however, was stubborn. When he set his mind to something, there was little chance of stopping him. Perhaps it was a trait that he had picked up genetically from Coyote. However, such a trait could be said of Sonia as well. Ezra gave a heavy sneeze, and then a good bound onto a barrel. He took a moment to steady himself, as if it was a rather awkward position for a coyote to be. His balance had improved over those few years, but even still, coyotes normally didn't perch on barrels. He peered up to determine how much progress was left. There was still a bit. So he made an unsteady leap onto a pile of wooden crates, then onto a partially covered ladder. It gave way from its place and began to tumble. Sonia cried out and covered her eyes. Oh, she couldn't bear to watch. Ezra never made panic an option. He was far too focused on his task. As the ladder tumbled, he bunched himself atop of it, and he sprang onto the windowsill. A small slip of one of his hind legs was his only misstep, and not a fatal one. He was still able to force his weight forward, and he nearly flopped into the bedroom. Ezra, you foolish cur! Sonia panted in relief. Despite her harsh words, she was so glad that he was not hurt. What am I going to do with you? You are such trouble. Ezra replied by standing on his hind legs and licking her face. She ended up having to push him back down on all fours. She let out a sigh and sat on the bed. I don't know what to do, Ezra. He whimpered and flattened his ears sadly as he sniffed at and attempted to push about the broken glass so that neither of them would step on it. What has she been up to? I don't want to marry Lord Grundle, let alone anything else. He is such a prude. I can't stand him. Ezra leapt onto the bed beside her and licked her cheek sympathetically. She petted and scratched him absently. I don't love him. I could never love him. She blushed deeply and felt herself grow hot. I love Coyote, Ezra. Sonia frowned as she flopped backwards onto her pillows. She was so miserable. She just wanted to cry. Ezra wasn't sure what he should do. Unlike Coyote, he could not speak, so he could offer no words of comfort or wisdom. He wanted to make her smile and be happy. He liked that Sonia best. Still, how could he offer that to her? She wanted Coyote, and that was something he just couldn't deliver. Coyote was a mystery, even to him sometimes. Nobody knew him through and through. It was rather nice to hear her say those words, though. She loved him, and he never even tried. Talk about skill. After losing love and trust, Coyote was a pained and bitter soul. Even his softer side was a bit bristled, until the day Sonia came into his life. Ezra believed that he had never seen Coyote as happy or content as he was with Sonia by his side. The long silence proved an opportunity for her to grow tired. She absently scratched at Ezra as he lay beside her. It was enough to bring a sense of laziness to him as well. As proof of the fact, he let out a big yawn.